Picture this. It's 2013. Chris Jericho stands in the ring, microphone in hand. He's not the villain tonight. He's not the hero. He's just a man about to say a word, a single word. And for that one word, the WWE machine would come down on him with shocking, unprecedented force. He wouldn't be fired. He wouldn't be sued. Instead, he'd be given a punishment almost never seen in the modern era. A 60-day suspension, a public ban, for a word. This is the story of corporate power, political correctness, and the night Chris Jericho broke the unbreakable rule. Now, before we get into the full story, I want to ask you something. Do you think this punishment was a justified corporate stand, or was it a massive overreaction to a simple mistake? Share your answer in the comments below. I will share my own opinion at the end of the video. And here's another one. Knowing what we know now about that era in WWE, was Jericho actually taking a bullet for something much bigger behind the scenes? I'll give you my take on that too after we break it all down. In this documentary, we're going deep into that infamous night in Brazil. We'll uncover exactly what happened word for word. We'll look at the explosive political context that made this incident a nuclear level problem for WWE. We'll break down the corporate panic that followed and the historic punishment that left the entire industry in shock. And we'll examine the lasting legacy of those 60 days, not just for Jericho, but for the entire rulebook of professional wrestling. Stick around because the real story is far stranger than the headline. To understand the weight of this moment, you have to understand Chris. Jericho's position in 2013, he was the ultimate company man. A first ballot future Hall of Famer, the innovator who always came back to put over new talent. He was trusted, revered, and safe. He was also a global ambassador for WWE, a man who performed in every corner of the earth. That global role is crucial because in the spring of 2013, WWE was in the midst of a massive, multi-million-dollar international expansion. They were planting flags in new markets, courting new television deals, and presenting a pristine, family-friendly, corporate-approved product worldwide. The pressure to be flawless was immense. One misstep in a foreign market could derail everything. And on April 19, 2013, in São Paulo, Brazil, Chris Jericho, the Ultimate Pro, was about to misstep catastrophically. The event was a live WWE house show. Not television, not a pay-per-view, a non-televised live event for a hot, passionate Brazilian crowd. Jericho was in a tag team match, partnering with The Miz against Dolph Ziggler and Big E Langston. The action was standard, but the crowd's energy was electric. During the match, Big E, a powerhouse athlete, was dominating. He lifted Jericho for his finishing move, the big ending. And as Jericho was held high in the air, he did what he'd done 1,000 times before. He trash-talked. He tried to get into his opponent's head to rally the crowd, to create a moment. He reached for a common, edgy wrestling insult. But in the noise, the adrenaline, and perhaps a momentary lapse, he didn't reach for the usual edgy insult. He reached for something else. Something with a different kind of power entirely. As Big E held him aloft, Chris Jericho shouted a single word in Portuguese. A word he likely heard from the crowd itself. A common slur in Brazilian Portuguese football culture. The word was viado. In the context of the sporting world there, it was a harsh, homophobic taunt, equivalent to a cruel anti-gay slur. The arena for a split second seemed to hiccup. Did the famous American superstar just say what we think he said? The match continued. Jericho and Miz got the win, and the show went on. But in the age of smartphones, nothing stays in an arena. Immediately, fan videos from multiple angles hit the internet. The audio was clear, unmistakable. The clip went viral overnight, first within the Brazilian wrestling community, then globally. The reaction was a firestorm. Brazilian media outlets, always critical of American cultural exports, pounced. LGBTQ+ advocacy groups, both in Brazil and internationally, issued scathing condemnations. This wasn't a backstage rumor or a leaked comment. This was video evidence of a top WWE performer using a hateful slur during the company's official event. For WWE's corporate office, this was a 5-alarm crisis. Their Be a Star anti-bullying campaign was prominently featured. They had publicly positioned themselves as an inclusive, progressive company. And here was one of their most famous ambassadors, on camera, doing the exact opposite in a key growth market. The legal and PR teams went into overdrive. The question wasn't if there would be punishment, but what the punishment could possibly be that would quell the outrage. Fines were normal. A private reprimand was standard. But this was a public relations inferno that demanded a public response. A suspension from television was the nuclear option, reserved for wellness policy violations or extreme cases of real-life misconduct. Yet that's where the discussions led. There was a precedent, sort of. Years earlier, a wrestler had been suspended for a racist on-air segment. But this was different. This was an unscripted moment at a house show, from a veteran who never got in trouble. For days, the industry held its breath. What would WWE do? Then the official statement dropped. It was brief, direct, and stunning. Chris Jericho was suspended for 60 days for using an inappropriate term during a live event. The wrestling world was floored. A 60-day ban for a single word? It was unprecedented. Behind the scenes, the message was brutally clear. Jericho, the legend, was made an example of. The suspension was a signal to the entire roster, to the media, and to the world. No one is above the new rules. In the global era, a misstep in any language in any country could cost you your career. Jericho himself was reportedly shocked and remorseful. He hadn't intended the hateful meaning. He'd clumsily used a term he thought was just generic trash talk. But intent didn't matter. Impact did. He apologized publicly and profusely, stating he was ignorant of the word severe meaning and was deeply sorry for the offense caused. He accepted the punishment and disappeared from WWE television. It's the sound of a corporate gavel. The moment the suspension was announced, it became the defining case study for a new era in wrestling. It was the ultimate collision between the old school, anything-goes mentality of wrestling's past and the hypersensitive, globally conscious corporate entity WWE was becoming. The punishment itself was the turning point. It proved that in the modern WWE, your microphone was never truly your own. That the consequences for on-screen actions now extended far beyond kayfabe, into the realm of international social politics. For 60 days, one of the biggest stars in the company was erased. No explanations on TV, no storylines to write him out. Just a void where Y2J used to be. That silence was louder than any word he ever shouted. The immediate consequence was Jericho's exile. He sat at home while his suspension played out. But the larger consequence was a palpable chill that went through the WWE locker room. Promos became more careful. Trash talking at live events, especially overseas, became measured. Everyone was now hyper-aware that any word in any language could be their last. The incident also forced a reckoning within WWE's own cultural sensitivity, training for talent. While the Be a Star message was there, the practical understanding of global cultural taboos was evidently lacking. This event likely led to more rigorous briefings for performers before international tours. For Jericho personally, it was a brutal public lesson. When he returned after those 2 months, he was the same phenomenal performer, but perhaps a more cautious one. The incident became a permanent dark footnote in an otherwise pristine career. So what is the legacy of the 60-day ban? It's a landmark. It stands as the purest example of WWE's zero-tolerance policy for actions that threaten its global business. It showed that the company was willing to sacrifice even a top star to protect its brand image in the international marketplace. The incident permanently raised the stakes for performer conduct outside of scripted television. It blurred the line between the character and the person in a new way. Now the person was held accountable for the character's unscripted mistakes in real time. Today, a similar incident would likely result in an even faster and harsher reaction. The Jericho suspension wrote the playbook. It's a story that reminds us that professional wrestling, for all its chaotic storytelling, operates in a very real, very sensitive world. And sometimes one word can change everything. Now to the questions I asked at the start. First, was the 60-day suspension justified or an overreaction? Here's my opinion. Given the severe cultural context and the threat it posed to WWE's business in a major market, I believe the suspension was a necessary overreaction. Was it harsh for a likely unintentional mistake? Absolutely. But WWE needed a definitive public action to extinguish the PR fire. They needed to show they took it seriously. A fine wouldn't have done that. They needed the headline: Superstar Suspended. It was corporate damage control of the highest order. And second, was Jericho taking a bullet for something bigger? My opinion is yes, but not in a conspiratorial way. He took the bullet for the entire company's lack of cultural preparedness. He was the face of a systemic failure, the failure to properly educate a globally traveling roster on local cultural landmines. His punishment was the shock therapy that forced the entire system to learn and adapt. He was the example, so no one else would have to be. So what do you think? Was WWE right to make such a harsh example of a top-tier legend? Or did Chris Jericho get a punishment that far outweighed the crime, even considering the context? I've given you my take, now I want to hear yours. Let's debate it down in the comments. If you found this deep dive into wrestling's untold stories fascinating, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel. We break down the real stories behind the headlines. Thanks for watching, and remember, in the global era, every word has weight.